Okay, we'll take questions now, and our first one today is from Jessica Wright.
Good afternoon, Jessica Wright from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Well, I came here today perhaps thinking of discussing the politics of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, but listening now, I think that this is a perfect opportunity to get the politicians to listen. If I can ask each of you, if the National Disability Insurance Scheme was implemented tomorrow, what is the one major thing in your life that would change from today until tomorrow?
We might start with Peter. We'll work along.
Lucky first. I think for me, my whole future, particularly around employment, it runs on the smell of an oily rag. There's no, I haven't got a guarantee from 1 month to the next that everything's going to be okay. And so I'm constantly finding ways to keep employed or to keep my life moving forward. So having an NDIS come along it'd end that. You wouldn't have to be spending all that time worrying about how you're going to get to the next stage in your life. You could just expect that to happen and actually concentrate on making that happen to the best of your ability. So that would be the best thing for me.
Rhonda?
Well, I think I'd age gracefully in that I'd be able to give up the fight and I'd go and relax, because until this is fully up, that's not possible. And, I hear from thousands of Australians each month, really, who are just absolutely languishing, waiting for this. So it'll just make me really happy and I'll be able to be a graceful old lady.
Paul?
Well, I suppose, to be straight and honest, it would reduce the massive financial burden that I'm carrying and that I'm going to carry in the future. I'm well aware of the huge costs and expenses facing me, and that will be a huge lift not only off my family, my young wife. She's not here. She's in a fleet 40. She's got a whole life and career in front of her. She's a senior academy. Our girls, 16 and 20. That burden of financial. That would be a huge thing for me. Can't do anything else about the rest of me but that. Can I also say I have no sense of feeling inferior or any of that stuff. I don't see myself as a victim. I don't see myself as the population and community looking down upon me at all. I'm just as proud now as ever was. Sometimes people with disabilities feel that maybe people, they feel second-class citizens or something. I don't feel like that at all.
Next question from Andrew Tillett.
Andrew Tillett from the West Australian. One of the things is the scheme is very admirable, and I think it is high time that we had something along these lines introduced. But the problem the government's got is, as you touched upon, was money. And they've got a commitment to do stuff on dental care as well, and aged care reform is another issue. And obviously last week the Prime Minister's announcement on more pay for community sector workers. I was wondering if you're concerned that you may end up with a compromise sort of scheme because of all these other commitments that the government's made, and what you can sort of do to put the pressure on to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Rhonda, you're on the advisory committee. Perhaps you'd like to start. I'm not sure if the others would like to comment, but I'll invite them to do so if they'd like.
Well, I think the first part of an answer to that question is that Australia's been very well managed economically over the last few years. I'm really glad I'm here and not in Europe or America. And the point of good economic management is really to do stuff like the National Disability Insurance Scheme fully. And, I feel very sure that this is going to be a real legacy for the government. I know the opposition is completely supportive. Mr Abbott mentioned that last week. He says no to many things the government puts up, but on this one he's completely pro. And I think it's really good to see the National Disability Insurance Scheme not in the middle of partisan warfare. It's rising above that, which is good. But, I think that it will be every person in this room, every Australian with interest will be part of the design, and it's up to all of us to make sure that it is a really, really good system, and with the Productivity Commission, of course, as a guideline.
Paul, Peter, I'm not sure if you want anything to add to that, but do you have any concerns? Yes, Paul?
Just have a go at that. In my professional life, we constantly have to win the argument that education is not just a cut off the bottom line, but it's an investment. And if you can demonstrate that, both qualitative and quantitative, that's half the battle. It's an investment. And the flip side is you always ask the question, well, if we don't invest in this, what do we got and what's the future hold? It's a sort of issue facing the American Congress at the moment about what to do about the economic crisis there. So I think they're the two principles that I professionally always operate off on issues in social policy, education policy.
In a sense, that's a point that I guess you're really making about your ability to work and not gain the level of support, but if you don't work, you can get it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Paul,
And
would you like to say something?
I guess from my point of view, I see employment as being, obviously I like to work and I love going to work every day, but in terms of disability support, I think employment is the peak. If someone's in a job, you don't get the pension, which is a great thing. For me, it was a celebration to get off the pension. And you don't get that. You pay tax, you contribute to your community, and at the same time you're getting support, but that's sustainable because you're contributing to that. So, while obviously not everyone is going to be able to achieve work for whatever reason, I think if we start talking money, I think for someone in my personal situation that's not an argument that by putting support in place for me to be at work, that's going to cover it anyway. So finance shouldn't be an issue there.
Taking a question now from Mrs. Schubert.
Misha Schubert from the Sunday Age. I'm going to continue to dwell on the finance of the matter. There have been a couple of ways that have been proposed about how government could get to funding this sort of scheme, either by finding savings in existing kind of budgets or looking at a Medicare-style levy. If you were advising governments and oppositions, how would you, which direction would you urge them in, and how would it be possible, do you think, to sell a Medicare-style levy to the public? Do you think there is a receptiveness in the community, even though that would mean essentially a tax hike for most working Australians?
Look, there are at least 3 schemes in the Productivity Commission report that are discussed. And from my listening to people with disabilities, as long as the money's secure and not facing the exigencies of annual budgets, as long as it's sustainable so that it's across a lifetime for the pool, as long as it's not buck passing between states and Commonwealth, as long as it's out of that, I think people with disabilities just want to see it. Really, the method is clearly up to the governments, government and the states. But I think that those characteristics would be very, very much welcomed.
Any further comments?
Just one, I agree with that. I think somewhere in the Productivity Commission, it extrapolates out to what, is it 5 years out after it's fully implemented, Rhonda, where it says the cost becomes neutral, becomes cost neutral? Rhonda, was that?
Well, I think that's a very good point, actually, that they do a cost benefit, and this is a scheme that will have such great returns in productivity. It's really going to be a centrepiece, actually, of cost benefit for Australia. So I think that is a very good point.
If I could just add to that 10 years ago, before I broke my neck and became disabled, if someone had said to me that there could be a tax increase or something to cover something like this, I possibly would have been of the opinion that why should I pay for that? I'm not disabled, but look where I am now, and this is exactly the same for every single person in this room. You don't know what's around the corner. So my message to anyone out there would be that you don't know where you're going to end up. So, getting behind this and supporting it is not just about the people with disabilities, but every person in this room that could be dealt a blow, basically.
We're going to Laura Tingle.
Laura Tingle from the Financial Review. Being an optimist, I'm presuming that the NDIS gets up and running, and I hope for everybody's sake that it does. My question was more a practical one. I have a friend in Canberra Hospital at the moment in the sort of nightmarish conditions you're talking about, basically stuck by fault of bureaucracy from being able to go somewhere else. And it's made me really focus on the realities of what happens when the NDIS gets going. Who's going to run it? Who's going to fight off the empires who currently control a lot of these services, because that's just human nature. And you talked a bit about top-up and bottom-up advocacy and development of this scheme, and I just wondered whether you believe that there's enough capacity to influence the way that new bureaucracy works so that it will work as you want it to work.
Who'd like to kick off? I think probably we should start with you, Rhonda, but maybe the question to the others is who should run it?
Well, I think that one of the centrepieces, like the National Disability Insurance Scheme is definitely about funding. You know, the system's underfunded by half. But the National Disability Insurance Scheme is about complete reform of how things are done now. And now, individuals and their families have no say. You know, there's not a system, there's little trials around Australia, but there's not a real commitment to there being a marketplace. So, you know, the ability to actually decide what services you'll have where and to really manage that isn't in Australia. And the centrepiece of the Productivity Commission recommendation is what's called individualised funding, with a core of that being self-managed, if that's what you choose to do. If you don't choose to do that, that's fine. And that's going to mean that services will have to be more responsive. There's going to be lots of new services. They haven't even been invented yet, the sort of responses that will occur from innovation and change. And I think that's tremendously exciting. And the governance that the Productivity Commission's recommended is commercial, number one, and really running this incredibly transparently and responsibly so that the fund is secure. So that's the insurance model that I think is also very valuable. The second part of the governance is that the incentive is on getting you what you need because it is an insurance model. So letting you languish in hospital doing poorly won't do well for the fund. So that's a good, I hate perverse incentives actually, and I love really positive ones like that. And, you know, the governance is a really key issue. That's why I think it's really important, and Peter's illustrated it, it has to be national because, you know, you want to be able to go anywhere in Australia. You don't want to have these differences where it's a lottery of a postcode, really. And people actually move. They move to live in a particular region and they never move again because that's where they think they get barely enough.
In inviting both Paul and Peter, if they wish to make a comment on that, if I could just throw another element into it. It seems to me that funding of itself does not solve the problem of a lack of coordination of services, which seems to be a common theme that has come out in this. Well, it is a common theme, and I think anyone who's had any dealings in this area knows it's a significant problem. So, you know, what can be done about that? Let me start with you, Paul, if I can.
In the best of all possible worlds, eh? I'm glad if I know. I mean, honestly, when you look at that whole area, there's so much contestation, there's so much. I mean, give you a couple of examples. If, like I am, you're a high needs patient, right? I'm not an aged care patient, but I'm a high needs patient. The system of nursing homes doesn't cater particularly well for that distinction. So you'll often find people say, Peter's age and younger, not often, I don't know the figures, I shouldn't say that, but there are young people in nursing homes who are there because they have high needs, but they're with old people. Secondly, I've done some research and I've found at least one nursing home says, no, if you come in here as a high needs permanently, you can't go off to work. You pay your bloody several hundreds of $1,000s of bond. So there's something wrong about that. I mean, if a person's employed as I am and as Peter is, for what we can do with our brains, and I presume Rhonda does, but I don't know what she does, then you know what I mean, Rhonda. If we're employed for our intelligence, or whatever that right word is, the very heavy physical disability, if it can be negotiated, as in my case, my PA at work is Maria, who apart from her qualifications, she's got nursing training, so she does the normal PA stuff, plus some typing. My EA does most of the transcription of my speeches and policy. So if you can set up arrangements where that can be done, why should you be forbidden to work if the time were to come, not mention me now, for somebody to be in a high needs nursing home? There's something crazy about that. That's just an example of bureaucratic. Again, I'm not promising to be an expert on this, and that's only anecdotal. I don't know what the research would say.
Yeah, look, I suppose from my side of things, yes, nationally is important. I think it's about whatever we do here, we need to make sure that it ranges, yes, across states and across the whole of Australia, but it also needs to be all in one basket. I think the most frustrating for me thing for me, at least recently, trying to sort out my employment situation, has been that some things are funded by the state, some things are funded federally, and it's all in different baskets of money that you just working out the system is hard enough. So I guess that's the big thing for me.
John Millard.
Thank you, Laurie. John Millard, Artsound FM. Dr. Galbally, in your address 2 years ago, you mentioned the shutout report, of course, of the organisation which you were chair. It gave one of the first contemporary comprehensive reports of disabilities, people with disabilities and their carers. One of its prime recommendations was the establishment of a national disability insurance scheme, but it was also much more comprehensive than that. Further to that, are there other priorities you think that you and the Disabilities Alliance should be addressing? In what order? And can you set priorities? Can you or the other members set such priorities? Other things we should be looking at once we've got such an achievement?
Well, I think the great thing about the National Disability Insurance Scheme at the centre is that it's going to require major reform in many other systems. Education would be one, because education relates to jobs and to living in the community and to having a really fully participative life. So the education system being reformed. I mean, the government has the National Disability Strategy with a lot of these other systems in it, but the pressure on them to really deliver those where they interface with the National Disability Insurance Scheme will be very strong. And I guess I put education at the top of the ladder because I think it's just so very important.
I'll move on now with questions. Ken Randall.
Ken Randall from Media Monitors. I'd like to ask this of anyone who's prepared to answer it, but you're all sounding very confident about the commitment to the implementation of this scheme. The last time anything comparable was attempted was back in the Whitlam years, and it just fell in a heap. And given the fact that all governments since then seem to become more and more risk-averse about taxing and raising revenue, do you feel that your confidence is well-founded?
Who'd like to have a go?
Look, I'll start. I've been around nearly as long as you, I think, and I was, around when Medicare actually was under design, and so I've sort of seen really major social policies and for Australia, and this is one of those. And I do feel confident. I do think that the tide's changed, not just with the government of the day, but with the opposition and all the parties, that they do want a legacy. That they see that this is very, very important. And, I do feel very confident, actually, that it's going to happen. And I haven't felt like that really. It was very bad luck that it didn't get up in 72, because it was nearly up. But I think that it is going to happen. There's been such strong public statements, including just the latest one was last night at the National Disability Awards dinner, where the Prime Minister indicated that this is her legacy policy, that she really wants, not that she wants this to happen, but it will happen. That's what she said, and I think that's a very public statement and a very big thing to say.
I might just move on to the last question, and it'll be my question. And it's one that I'd put to each of you, so I'm not inviting necessarily a long response. This is to be rolled out from 2013. It's now 2011. That's another couple of years away, or at least 18 months, shall we say, right through to 2017. So what should happen in the interim? What can happen in the interim to improve this? Because presumably we don't want to just tread water, and I suspect if we did just tread water, we'd actually be going backwards.
Well, we're on target with the Productivity Commission guide, if you treat this as a guide. They've started very quickly. They've got the infrastructure in place that's been recommended. The time for action will be then 12/13 after this bit of work's done. That'll be another press club, I hope, to make sure that all's going well. I think that would be very good. And then 13, there's a timetable here, and I've got no reason to think that that won't be adhered to. I've got every reason to think it will be. It started exactly on time and on budget according to this plan in the Productivity Commission report.
Well, I guess if I just extend that question to Peter and Paul, then is there something that needs to be done before we get there? Is there something I mean, obviously there's lots that needs to be done, but should we really be focusing on things now that can be done in advance of this? Rhonda, it seems like you might want to add.
Well, I think there's an enormous amount that needs to be done. Pulling it back a year is heroic, but really tough, because this is a very, very major reform. And, the timetable that's being developed at the moment with the states, that's the first step, and the chunks of work are being all sorted out. So there's an enormous amount to be done. If we don't want this to just be money, I'm not saying just money, because I know that's important, but if it's not complete reform as is recommended here, and I'm sure it will be, then, the value of it won't be really nearly as much.
Peter, any concluding remarks?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And that would be a big danger for people like myself who would, in that period in between, be really disadvantaged. So I guess my message, if there's anyone out there watching, don't forget that we still need to fix those issues in between.
Paul.
Right, quickly, I want to see a timetable for legislation. I want to hear the third reading speech delivered and voted on. Right, practical, that's got to be done. Second, I want to see the colour of the money. I want to see that the pilot schemes are funded. They're starting pretty soon as well. And thirdly, I want to see a commitment to the kind of flexibility that I mentioned in my speech. I mean, it's a shocking metaphor. I hate using it, but one size does not fit all. There are some conditions that do require specificity and safety net. They're my 3 points. Legislation timetable, third reading speech approved, money, the colour of the money, and flexibility as part of the understanding of implementation.
Paul Brock, Rhonda Galbally, Peter Dutch, thank you very much for your time today. Look, in conclusion, I must say, as President of the Press Club, this is one of those addresses, one of those lunches, one of those discussions that make us feel like we are, in fact, doing what we're intended to as a club. Thank you.
Oh, good night, Will.